The views and opinions expressed here on Wrestling Winedown are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. What's up, guys? It's Lo, and you are tuned in to Wrestling Winedown, a female-founded and hosted podcast dedicated to professional wrestling and our favorite adult beverage. If you keep up with us on social media, you'll know that I absolutely love putting a wrestling look together. But I must say the cosplayers in our community are definitely the most creative people when it comes to putting an outfit or look together. I am so honored to be joined by Ashley, also known as AndCosplay. Ashley is spilling the wine on her love for professional wrestling. Even though she is a new fan, she has the most amazing story about how she got into professional wrestling. She's also sharing how she's been able to encompass the essence of wrestlers through her cosplays, including the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes, WWE Raw Women's Champion Liv Morgan, former AEW Women's Champion Jamie Hayter, and many more. Ashley also takes us through the process of cosplaying, who she looked up to when she first got into the community, as well as what some of her favorite cosplays have been, as well as some of her most difficult to construct. Through her amazing cosplaying, Ashley has had the opportunity to speak on cosplay at conventions such as C2E2 and Fan Expo in Chicago. Ashley is sharing with us how those experiences have been and how it has built up her community even more. So grab your favorite glass of bubbly. We're going in for the 3 count. We are back with another episode of Wrestling Winedown. I love the cosplayers in our community. I feel like they're so creative. And honestly, you guys are some of God's strongest soldiers because I don't know how you do it. I really don't know how you do it. I am so honored to be joined by Ashley, also known as AndCosplay. You've probably seen her amazing cosplays of the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes, as well as Liv Morgan and many others. Welcome to Wrestling Winedown. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me. I've been such a big fan for a long time.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I've been a big fan of you as well.
Yeah, I'm always excited to just talk about all things cosplay and wrestling. So this is perfect.
Let's dive right in. When did you become a professional wrestling fan?
I love telling this story because it's just so unusual, but I'm still a pretty new fan for the record. I started watching pay-per-views with my friends a couple years ago, so this is still really new to me. But when it really clicked was going to WrestleMania 38 in Dallas. Those friends, they were engaged at the time, and 2K Games was running a contest to get married at WrestleMania. So they did a whole video and entered and everything, and they ended up getting chosen. And like a week before, they were able to invite 4 people with them to be in their wedding party. So they hit me and my husband up and they're like, can you guys come with? And then like 2 of our other friends got to go too. Luckily, I got off work the week before, but we got to spend like the whole weekend there in Dallas. They got actually married at like the Access Superstore like the day before Mania started.
Oh, wow.
And then we got to actually attend like night 1 and night 2. We had amazing seats and it was just the coolest thing. So I was literally there when Cody Rhodes came back and I didn't know anything. And I was like, who is this dude? This is so cool. And then we flew home the next morning, Monday morning, and I'm like, I have to watch Raw. I have to know like what he's going to say, what happens now. And then ever since then, it's been like 12 hours of wrestling a week. It was just hooked there.
You know, I need details on this wedding. How was it? Was it the fans that kind of were in attendance as well? Was it private? Like, how did it go?
They had that stage set up. You've probably seen a lot of videos there and stuff where people could like do entrances and things. And they had the wedding there. And like, we all came out. Vic Joseph was like there. And so was like when the 24/7 title was still a thing, they were all there. Tamina. It was just so unreal. But, you know, fans were gathered like around the group, and there's photos somewhere. I'll have to like pass them along.
Yeah, definitely. Oh my God, that's so amazing. What entertains you and keeps you interested in wrestling?
A lot of it is like the fandom, and I know it gets a lot of like the internet wrestling community is not always the greatest, but in person I found that like the community is just really the best, especially cosplay, and it just like opens up conversation when you're at Comic Cons and stuff like that. And just like, even if I don't regularly watch Raw and SmackDown, it's like I'm always talking about it with my friends and other people. And it's just like always like speculating what's going to happen next. But there's also just so much wrestling, especially like living in the Chicagoland area. There's a show going on somewhere all the time, like freelance wrestling and all these indie shows. If I get a little burnt out on a storyline or promotion, it's like there's so many other things I could check out. Like I started getting into New Japan like a year ago and been on the AEW kick. So it's just really cool. There's always something.
Who were some of your favorite wrestlers to watch a couple years ago when you first started watching versus now?
So since it's only been a few years, like a lot of them are the same. Obviously, Cody's why I got into wrestling. I really liked Liv since the beginning too, like back when she was teaming with Rhea, RIP. But and then Charlotte Flair was another one. So I still really like them, which is really interesting to see just in a span of a couple years how different it is. Cody's the big champ and Judgment Day wasn't even a thing like when I started watching. And then on the AEW side of it, for some reason I like gravitated towards Ethan Page, probably because I stumbled on his YouTube channel and that became like my comfort. But now it's like he's in NXT and was champs. Just like insane to see the difference between now and just 2 years ago.
I love the toy vlogs as well.
Oh, yeah. I miss them so much.
Maybe they'll return one day. We'll see. As I mentioned, you are a cosplayer. You've been able to capture the essence of the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes to former AEW Women's Champion Jamie Hayter to current WWE Raw Women's Champion Liv Morgan. When did you first begin cosplaying?
I started in 2017, and like at the time I was super big into like Star Wars and Marvel and all that, which like I still do here and there. But I just kind of like really got latched onto it when I went to my first convention was C2E2, which everybody's a big fan of that one. And then the thing I do when I'm super obsessed with something is I cosplay it. So eventually I thought I'd try out the wrestling side of it. Ended up loving it. It's some of the most fun costumes I think I've made just because they're so colorful and I get to use sparkly stuff. And it's really just kind of gone from there. During quarantine is when I was doing the most cosplay I've probably ever done. And that's when I started my TikTok and my YouTube. And I started sharing more tutorials and resources out with people just because giving back to the cosplay community is kind of a big thing to me. So I really found my place doing that.
Were you inspired by any wrestling cosplayers when you were entering the community?
Yeah, definitely. One of the first things I do when I want to cosplay something is I entered in like hashtag wrestling cosplay on Instagram just to see. I'm like, is this like a thing people cosplay? Like, I just want to check it out. Casey over the Moonsault, of course, came up and I was just like, oh, this is so cool. And she definitely is after my own heart because I know she does a lot of gender bent costumes, cosplaying male wrestlers. And I'm like, this is cool. I love seeing what she makes. It's awesome. Got a few others here and there. I know there's this one guy named Chris has really cool stuff I've seen.
Oh, yes, I've seen his.
Yeah. There's the macho verse is all over the internet. He cracks me up. And then just through doing my Cody cosplay, anyone who's ever worked on like their own, we tend to message each other, like to bounce ideas back and forth. And then his handle changed when he first started. I think it's the Cosplay Nightmare now on Instagram. He's done different Cody looks and we bounced ideas back and forth about making that stupid mask. So it's just like a really awesome cosplay community group because in other fandoms, sometimes it tends to be a little gatekeepy. Some people get a little like odd about like, oh, you're cosplaying this character I cosplay, and there's like a weird competition for no reason. But I have never experienced that with the wrestling cosplay community. It's just like everybody wants to bounce ideas and they're so excited about it. And maybe because it's like a little bit more niche of a community, but I really love it.
What a time to be a wrestling fan. It's Iridian Fierro of Chardonnay and Chisme here. With so many awesome events on the horizon, don't get caught slipping when it comes to putting together a fire outfit. Wrestling Winedown has a variety of cute, affordable items for the girlies, by the girlies. Get yours now at shop.wrestlingwinedownlv.com.
Can you take me through the process from start to finish of cosplaying? I know it's a lot. How do you select, first of all, which wrestler you will cosplay? And do you have like any go-to stores that you will frequent when you're just starting to find the items that you want to elevate this work in progress that you're working on?
Yeah, really choosing a cosplay just comes down to like whoever I'm obsessed with at the time. And if they have cool gear, I'm like a sucker for a cool jacket pretty much. And like I kind of take into account like something that rather than just being somebody's like a little more generic looking and no one know what's going on. Like some distinct makeup, some cool gear I'd really like to make. And then like I tend to really like gender bending stuff just because I could be a little more creative with making things and kind of changing it up to fit how I want to fit. But once I have my idea, I almost always start with a sketch. My Cody cosplay, a lot of my other cosplays all were like this big sketch saved somewhere on my computer now. But doing that, I'm able to, not only can I see what I want to change up, like, do I want to do shorts? Do I want to do tights? Should it be blue or red? I start to like make my little notes of, well, this thing could maybe be this material and I might want to use this for this. Start to get like a little bit of a rough budget idea that way too. So that's always where I start for that. Then like as much as I can, I try to find stuff that I could use as like base pieces for it. So it's not always from scratch. Like if I could thrift something, that's great. Poshmark is probably my favorite place to find really unique items that I could use for stuff. Even like the base of the red coat I use for my Cody cosplay, like it looks nothing like it does now, but it was like a red trench coat. And I'm like, cut the collar off and make a new collar. I could do this and that, like see where I could start with that kind of stuff. And otherwise it's like a lot of fabric stores, Joanne. There's a lot of little like local stores in the suburbs and in the city that I like to go in and physically see stuff, because shopping online for fabric is way harder, but it's like gives me some more ideas, and I could see something that's like, it's not its intended purpose, but you can find a way to use it. Like my Danhausen cape, I think it's like upholstery leather or pleather on it or something, but I found in like a discount bin, and it's really just like getting out there, looking around, seeing how I could use stuff in new ways, really.
Do you feel like the wrestling cosplays are a little bit more difficult or intricate compared to the cosplays that you were doing previously?
A little bit, yeah. Mostly because it was a lot of different materials I never really worked with before. Sewing wasn't really my strong suit, and now I think that's changed just because of making all these costumes, but got to use like cooler materials. I never really, I had a Cricut cutting machine for the longest time and never took it out of the box, but then it was like, oh, all these decals on everything, like this is a perfect use for it. I guess we'll fire that up. So I learned how to use that. Now I'm like a Cricut pro. So it's been really cool. It's definitely pushed me to try new things and learn new materials.
What has been the hardest cosplay to put together for you?
That stupid Cody jacket was a lot. Not stupid. I love it so much. My Charlotte Flair cosplay probably was the hardest for me because, like I said, sewing wasn't really my strong suit, but I had like a pattern for this. It was like a wizard robe. And I'm like, okay, I can like put that together and then adjust it from my mock-up. And I did all that. It was looking great. And here's why I don't like shopping for fabric online, because I found a bunch of samples of something that I thought was going to look really cool. And I bought all the yards of it, sewed up the robe, put the lining in it and everything. And I tried it on and at all the seams, like the shoulders and everything, because it was so heavy. It was just like, it was shredding and just falling apart. And I'm like, oh no, like there's no saving this. And I ended up totally changing the fabric I used, but almost gave up on it. But I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah, I really liked that one.
Thank you. Yeah, it was something. And then just, it doesn't look like too much looking at it. It's just so sparkly. But like there were all these sewn pieces that were kind of shaped like a feather, and they had like gems on them. And I think I just sew like 50 something of them for the front and the back. And I was like bedazzling, and my sciatica was flaring up. And I'm like, I'm too old for this. But it turned out, I'm glad I didn't give up on it. Still love that cosplay.
What has been your easiest cosplay to put together?
Probably my Liv Morgan one, the like elimination chamber gear with the yellow skirt. Even though I made the skirt myself, like everything was like, I have the shirt on. And it was just like cutting the design out of the shirt, put it on this mesh one. I made a lot of different skirts now at this point and have like a little formula for it. So that luckily went together really easily.
I think I know the answer to this, but I'm just going to ask it. What has been your most rewarding cosplay?
Were you thinking Cody Rhodes probably?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I just, because I've had that for, it's been like 2 years now since I made it, and I've been able to add things to it, added new details, and anytime he comes out with like some new cool piece, I'm like, I'm going to make that now. And it's just been really fun because like I've worn that all the time, and I'm one who will wear a costume once and then I get kind of bored of it. So the fact that it's still so fun is just great. But even just like the reception to it too, because I mean, anybody who knew wrestling recognized existed at first, but I feel like now it's just become so like mainstream and he's like the big face and so many kids know who he is too, that it's like just seeing the reactions from people at conventions over the years has just been really cool.
So how did you piece that all together? I know you have a mask, like the skull mask that you had made. I know you have the jacket. How does something like that kind of all come together? Do you have something specific that you start with? Like, do you start with the tights? Do you start with the robe? How do you kind of figure that out?
I feel like I usually start with what I think is going to be the hardest piece and the one that's like, if I can't make this, then this cosplay can't happen, you know, like, which for that was the jacket, because it's like, okay, if I fail at this, then this is not coming together. But it was definitely a labor of love, but I kept going through it.
And how long did that one take to make?
I tried to keep track of time just making it initially, and I know I've added a lot since then, but it was like 50 some hours I think I had logged on just doing the jacket.
That's incredible.
And let me tell you, I always think about making another one like in a different color because there's so many, but I spent so many hours doing iron-on like transfers with all the like trim and stuff that I got tendonitis in my wrist and like could not move.
You have injuries. We're not in the ring.
Yeah, like yeah, between that and the Charlotte cosplay, I'm like, man, what am I doing to myself? But I've learned a lot about taking breaks and ergonomics. I have a standing desk now, so we're good.
We love a standing desk. Yes.
Yes.
You've recently had the opportunity to speak on cosplay at conventions, including Fan Expo in Chicago and one of our favorites, C2E2. How have these experiences treated you? And did you feel like it connected you with other cosplayers, whether that's wrestling cosplayers or just cosplayers that aren't focused on wrestling in general?
Yeah, at Fan Expo Chicago, I got to be a cosplay guest this year, which was really cool. This is my second time doing that there. And it's just great because it gives me a booth where I could show off all the stuff I've done. I bring a book of prints so people can just browse everything I've made and ask questions. But my favorite thing is just meeting people there, just talking about ideas with people. Some of my favorite things at Fan Expo were like younger kids who would come by with their parents and they would start asking questions about things. And they'd be like, how did you get into this? How did you learn to do that? Like, what advice do you have? And that's just super rewarding to me. It's really fun. And I know Fan Expo, like one of my peeves with a lot of conventions is I feel like they don't really embrace wrestling as a piece of like entertainment and part of their programming as much. So there really wasn't much programming in the way of wrestling there. But I just like, I had some of my belt on display, obviously cosplayed it 2 of the 3 days. And like so many people came by to talk about it. Like, just like, what do you think of this? And, you know, what do you think is going to happen with this storyline? And just like spent hours talking about wrestling, which was so cool. And then I'm like, why did they turn down my wrestling panel for that convention? But yeah, that's always really great. And then at C2E2, it's just cosplaying wrestling. Like I mentioned before, it just kind of like unlocked a whole new like community in that convention scene. Just some of the coolest people. People are just so excited to talk about it and see the costumes. I love it.
How many times have you been to C2E2?
Oh gosh, I want to say like maybe 6. I know there were like some weird years with COVID in there, but I've gone every year since 2017. So it's been quite a few. It's definitely my favorite convention just because they really bring in like such a diverse group of like guests and stuff, huge artist alley. I think they have like really great fan run panels too. Definitely my favorite.
Do you feel like they've kind of mastered how to intertwine wrestling into a convention? Because I know there's San Diego Comic-Con, they do a really good job, and there's other Comic-Cons out there as well where you'll see wrestlers be on a panel or they might do autographs. But do you feel like C2E2 has it down? Or do you feel like they could maybe change?
I feel like there's still room for improvement, but they're definitely doing it the best out of like the conventions in this area. I personally haven't made it out to like New York or San Diego, but just in this area, they bring in the guests. I know part of that is because of like pro wrestling tees being local and they bring in a lot that way. And they have, I don't know how many fan panels get submitted, but they do have at least like 1 or 2 on each convention. In my memory, like I can only think of like one large wrestling panel. I think it was a lot of the AEW people a couple years back, but like when they had like all the guests, MJF this past year and stuff, felt like they could have done a little more with, you know, Q&A panels and stuff like that. But it's starting to, they're doing it better than like some other conventions out here, I think.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I went to C2E2 last year, and then I went to New York Comic Con, I think the year before. You know, I think New York Comic Con is like the top, right? Like
Yeah,
they're
the
able to bring in like both WWE, they're both able to bring in both AEW. And I think honestly, C2E2 has that potential. I see that happening in the next couple years, but I do agree with you. It'd be nice to, you know, maybe see a panel or two with the wrestlers on it, or, you know, wrestling figures. I don't know if you knew, but last year Rikishi was supposed to have a panel.
Yeah, I do remember that. That's what I heard, because I don't know what I was doing, but it was on my schedule, and I'm like, oh my God, I wonder how that went. And somebody was like, oh yeah, it didn't happen.
Yeah. Iridian from Best Friends and I were sitting front row. We were ready, and he did not show up. The lady next to us was like, hey, you know, he's in, where did she say he was at? Some cold city he was in. I don't know if it was Canada or somewhere, but she was like, he is not in the States. And I was like, oh. Okay, so that was interesting, because that, you know, that definitely would have been a good panel to see, especially seeing how active he is with his son's storylines and stuff like that. But I'm hoping, like you said, in the future that they're able to kind of utilize wrestling a little bit more. I don't know if wrestling is still kind of seen as not mainstream, but we're here.
Yeah, that's really how I think it is too. It's like they have, like, you know, the big Marvel names and stuff that they know will draw a crowd, and I feel like not all conventions realize how big of a draw some of these people are. Well, not some, a lot of them.
Right.
Like the people will turn out for it. I'm glad we get what we do, but yeah, it would be nice to have like some of those major panels and, you know, even exclusives and stuff. Like I know C2E2 doesn't always have convention exclusives. They've had a lot of like Funko and comic exclusives recently, but I'm like, how do we get like wrestling in on that, or like a Jazzwares panel or something would be great.
See, they need you to be planning all of this. You know what's on the table, girl.
I got design background, marketing background. I can.
Are there any cosplays in the works that we can look forward to seeing?
So right now, cosplay like kind of was on the back burner for a minute, because I moved to a new house like a month ago. This is my new craft room. I just painted it like last week. So I'm still settling in, but there's a horror convention, Days of the Dead in Chicago in November, that I'm going to be a guest judge for their cosplay contest. I've been back and forth between like an Alexa Bliss cosplay or like cool Uncle Howdy, like gender bent cosplay would be really cool for the horror side of things. So we'll see what I come up with for that.
We will keep an eye on that. I love that. What advice would you give to someone who wants to attempt their first cosplay, but either doesn't know where to start, or they might be nervous to invest into something new?
Honestly, my biggest advice is to just do it and try it out. It can be really intimidating at first, but honestly, cosplay doesn't have to be a huge investment. Like I know you can easily pour a lot of money into it, but even just like the most simple cosplay people have the most fun with, thrifting a lot of stuff, you can easily put together something on a budget with recycling things. And then really like everything I've ever learned came from YouTube. So if there's anything you want to learn how to do and how to make, there's a YouTube tutorial for it out there. So really just try it is my best advice.
Thank you, Ashley, so much for joining me here on Wrestling Winedown. Where can the people keep up with you on social media?
Yeah, I'm AndCosplay on everything. YouTube, TikTok, Twitter. If you want to see me yell about wrestling, that's all on Twitter. And then Instagram as well.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Wrestling Winedown. You can find all of our other episodes available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. We are on Twitter and Instagram at WWDCAST. We also have our official merch store, which you can find at shop.wrestlingwinedownlv.com. Let us know what you thought about this episode. What was your favorite part? Until next time, enjoy your wine and, of course, enjoy your wrestling. Cheers!